The results are in. BC has voted, and the harmonized sales tax will be no more. With more than 1 million people voting in the referendum, nearly 55% voted yes to extinguish the HST. Here's a look at how the vote broke down overall. 54.73% voting yes to dump the tax, 45.27% voting no, voting in favor of keeping the tax. We have lots to get to tonight with reaction from all over the island and the province. We'll hear from the opposition leader, Adrienne Dix, as well as the Premier, as many questions were fired at her today, including will there be a fall election, plus all the details on when the tax will be gone and what this means for the province. And of course, we'll hear from you throughout the cast how voters feel about the death of the tax. But first, to how the day unfolded, starting with the media circus around the legislature this morning as Elections BC made their way to the Speaker of the House with the results. That's where Check News reporter Kylie Stanton was this morning, and she begins our coverage.
Barely out the door and swarmed by cameras.
Yes, I'm just going to the clerk's office.
The attention is warranted.
We'll follow you around.
The results of the HST referendum are in.
The yes side, 54.73%, and the no side, 45.27%.
It's never been popular. Opposition to the controversial harmonized sales tax began as soon as it was announced more than 2 years ago, starting with a petition to repeal the tax spearheaded by Bill Vander Zam's Fight HST group.
So far, so good.
And successfully paving the way for the referendum.
Don't ever doubt that a few people can change the world.
The backlash crippled the Liberals.
It's time for a new person to lead the province.
Leaving a new face,
I, Christy Clark,
to deal with the fallout.
the public has very clearly spoken, and now is the time to turn the page.
The decision forces the government that brought in the HST to take it out.
The target time in terms of restoring the PST so that we're back into a PST-GST system is about 18 months.
That's loosely pegged for March 31st, 2013. The PST will be reinstated at 7% with all permanent PST exemptions. But the plan leaves a $3 billion hole in the government's budget, meaning cutbacks in spending. What could be another blow for the BC Liberals.
This has been a significant problem for the BC economy, a huge disruption, and it was all caused by the Liberal Party.
But cheering the loudest, the Fight HST group.
It sent a message to politicians throughout our country especially that they can't simply do things because it's the will of a premier or the party, that they have to, in fact, on an issue as big as we see it here, consult the people.
It seems the lesson has been learned.
We are going to change the process. We are going to change the way government engages with citizens.
Given the outcome and what lies ahead, the stage is set to make good on this promise.
We heard from the Finance Minister and, of course, the Premier, and we'll get more reaction from Premier Clark in just a moment. But first, we're now joined by the Opposition Leader, Adrienne Dix, in front of the Legislature today. Very busy day down there, a bit of a circus at times. Can you tell us tonight what your gut reaction to the news was from 11 o'clock this morning when you found out?
It's a great day. You know, it was the People's Referendum Campaign. 700,000 people signed the initiative petition. As someone who took those petitions door to door in my neighborhood, it felt great. It was the People's Referendum, and the people won today. They won over Liberal arrogance. But you know, unlike the Finance Minister who talks about how complicated tax law is and really expresses a little bit of contempt towards the way people made their decision, I think people took this decision seriously. It was a 2-year discussion. They took it seriously. They voted, and 150,000 more voted yes. I think they made the right decision. I'm obviously very pleased with the results.
Now, it's fair to say that this chapter is just starting, or another chapter is about to begin. There's a lot of speculation of an election. Your party must be preparing for that as well. There's also a large part of the population, 45%, that wanted to keep the HST. I imagine a lot of people in the business community. What is your response to them?
Well, sure. It was a debate, and the Liberal Party had a huge advantage in that debate. They spent $7 million of public funds that could have been used, in my view, on much more important things, on Liberal Party ads. There was a huge disparity in what both sides spent on the campaign, but look, the result was very decisive. I respect everyone who participated, those who voted yes and those who voted no. But I think the clear message from the people of BC is that we need to return to the PST. better for our economy, better for communities, better for families. And that's what they decided to do. And I think on the Liberal Party side, I think they justifiably, and over 2 years, should reflect on the way they do politics, because they misled people initially, they misled people all along. Premier Clark misled people in this referendum campaign about her intentions. She said she wouldn't talk about lowering the rate, and then she did. She said it would be buying votes, then she went and did it. So that kind of politics, I think, has also been repudiated, even amongst some people who may have voted no. They still, I don't think, admired the way the Liberal Party conducted itself in this referendum campaign.
Now, if things go according to your plan, you very well may be in Premier Clark's position as Premier, whether it happens this fall or spring or in a couple of years from now. When they're talking about this $300 million shortfall in the budget, what would you do in government to make that up?
Well, remember, Premier Clark just announced that they could lower the rate of the HST to the tune of $1.8 billion. So she said there was enough money for that. I mean, we just got to hold the government accountable right now for doing what the people said they should do, which is return to the PST. Now, it only took 11 months to go from the PST to the HST. That's how long the Liberals took. They're saying they can't return to the PST before 19 months. So we'll have to hold them to account for that. But look, they said that there was $1.8 billion in tax room to reduce taxes, to try and buy votes in the HST campaign.
Would you raise taxes if you were there? If you
well,
were in the position?
Here's what I won't do. Here's what I won't do. I'm not going to be raising taxes and not saying so before an election campaign. People will know where I stand before the election campaign. And I think partly as well, I think people rejected the HST because it's bad tax policy, but they also rejected an approach to politics that the Liberals did in the last election. They promised in writing not to bring in the HST, so did the NDP. But then the day after the election, they proceeded to bring in the HST. I think the people responded really well to that, actually. I mean, people often could become angry and cynical and dismissive of the process. That's not what happened here. People went out, they got petitions, people said it couldn't be done, we couldn't get a referendum on the ballot, they did it. I think that's a great response.
All right, we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there, Adrian. Thank you for taking the time. It was great talking to you. And I hope that we get this chance again, because a lot more is going to happen in the months ahead, I predict. Thank you very much.
A lot's going to happen. A great day for democracy today. Great to talk to you.
Opposition leader Adrian Dix. Now, we've heard from the politicians. Now we'll turn over to at least one critic, Mike Smith from the Province newspaper. Mike, you were there this morning. You were a part of the circus there in the scrum. I was right there with you inside the legislature as they were bringing up the results. I'll ask you about Adrian's response in just a second, the opposition leader's response, but first, just your take on the morning.
A historic day here at the legislature, Scott. This is the first time this has ever happened in Canada, that we've had a citizen-led initiative, a petition drive headed by former Premier Bill Vander Zalm to kill a very unpopular tax. This has never happened in any province in Canada ever, so we're making some history here. It's bad news for the government. They don't like this. They wanted to win it. They were hoping they would win it, but they're in a pickle now. It's a beautiful day out here, but it's a little stormier inside the legislature because the government's got to figure out what to do now.
Now, and also just listening to the opposition leader and kind of sidestepping some of the questions in terms of taxes, there is a huge shortage now in the budget, say the Liberals. There's the $1.6 billion that have to go back to the feds. Where does this leave everybody?
In a real pickle, because this HST raised a lot of money, and now the government's staring at a big hole in this revenue stream for the budget. The government is saying that they're going to balance the budget. The NDP says, hey, we'll balance the budget too. They can't do that without doing one of two things, raising taxes or cutting services. Neither is a very palatable option. You've got the Premier now out there saying today, hey, maybe we could be into an election in the fall. You just tried to pin down Adrian Dix, Scott, on what he would do, and he doesn't want to say yet. So it's a very fluid situation on both sides of the aisle here.
And you talked about the fall election. The Premier a lot of questions were asked of her today about the election. I'm just going to keep you here for a second, but I'm going to throw to a clip of her responding to some of the reporters talking about a fall election. Listen to this.
I'm going to be focused on the creation of jobs until May 2013, if that's when the election is held. And until the day before the election is held, I'm going to be focused on that whenever it is held. So this question, this idea, this dichotomy that you draw between whether or not you can govern and not know when the election is at the same time, I think is wrong.
So, Mike, maybe I'm a bit of a cynic, but I imagine that the Liberal machine is working away, trying to figure out how this all plays out. I assume that they would be polling to find a time, because at some point this Premier is going to have to demand a mandate from the people. So whether it seems unrealistic at this point she would wait 2 years for an election.
They're polling like crazy, Scott. What they're going to do is they're going to poll very aggressively and try and figure out how British Columbians feel about the governing Liberal Party right now. And if the polls look good, I think she would go to an election this fall. But she could wait it out. So it's a real guessing game about whether they're going to go to an election at all. They're saying that they're going to consult with British Columbians about what to do now with this big hole in the budget because of the HST being killed, whether they're going to raise taxes, cut services. In the meantime, she's saying that she could throw all that up in the air and go to an election within a matter of weeks. So it's a very unusual situation and very fluid, and we're all going to be watching carefully almost day by day to see what she does.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. I know we'll be talking to you again in the very near future. It seems like the historic BC politics, what we're known for in this province, is continuing, which I imagine is wetting your whistle a bit.
You know what? This is the story that's kept on giving for 2 years. And it's going to keep on going because the government's in a real jam here now, and it's going to be really intriguing to see what the Premier does.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for taking the time. I know it was a very busy day. Mike Smith from the Province newspaper.